Well, welcome guys. Welcome to Fishing for Beginners. So glad you tuned in. Today we're going to be talking about jigs and jig heads, more specifically jigs that require jig heads and how to use them. So as you can see right here, jig heads and jigs themselves come in many different sizes, colors, and arrangements. The principle is relatively the same whether you are going with a small jig or whether you're going with a big jig. So on this side of the spectrum over here, we basically have jigs that are going to be applied to things like bluegill, crappie, shad, smaller game fish. And as we bump up in size, even over to the super large jig heads, these are going to be used for lingcod and cabezon when you're fishing off of the jetty and in the ocean and things like that. Although this one here is a very small jig and this one is a very large jig, you can see from their construction that they are pretty much exactly the same. So jigs have the opportunity to actually be used many different ways. For example, you could use a worm with a jig, a grub style, tube skirts. These are basically just larger grubs over here, but then you even got like this crazy guy right here. So you can use a lot of different styles for your jigs. Whether it's small or it's large, applying the jig, tube, or skirt is going to be the same for larger or smaller. So all we're going to do is we're going to take our skirt. This is a grub style, and you just slip it onto the hook, slide it down, pop the hook out the side once you get so far down, scoot it all the way up, and you can see that our jig head has a barb that will actually hold that on there when we go to fish it. Now, if we were to apply a worm, it would be pretty much the same thing. We're just going to scoot the worm onto the jig head. We're going to pop the hook out, and you can see that the jig head has a barb so that it will hold the worm onto the jig head. Tube skirt is still exactly the same principle. So slide the head of the skirt onto the hook. You actually don't have to pop it out the side because the hook will come out the bottom of the skirt, and then scoot the skirt forward over the prong so that the skirt is being held by the jig head. So now, as we can see, we've got a few different styles here already. And as we apply a larger jig head, again, it is just the same principle. Just slide it on, pop the hook out, and as you can see, the jig head has a barb so that it will hold our tube. Now, sometimes you run into ones that are a little more complicated, maybe in the larger scale like this, and which way should we hook it? And I would say that, this side looks appealing to you or I more so than this side because it's flat. And we're going to be pulling the line up here, so maybe I would think that we would hook it this way with the flat side up, because then as we're presenting this to a fish, they're seeing it from this way down on the bottom, the rockfish, and it's coming by and they're seeing that side of it. But you could hook it up the other way too, and it wouldn't necessarily be wrong. So this is the general concept of a jig head, and like I said, it comes in many different colors and arrangements and sizes. You're going to have to experiment a little bit for what species you're fishing for and how to use the proper jig head. Well, if you enjoyed this video, definitely give me a thumbs up on it, and maybe you'll go over and set the hook on that subscribe button. You can click the notification bell. You'll get updates on all of my upcoming videos. Until next time, guys, stay fishy.